Sometimes when we fight with one another, it can get ugly. And sometimes fights go on prolonged to the point where people forget why they're fighting with each other, but one hurt piled on another keeps growing and growing until they can't find a way to get back together. That's the context of today's story. A fight that went on for century after century after century. We've all perhaps heard of King David. The fight began in the reign of his grandson. David's son Solomon had just died, and Solomon had taxed the people with oppressive taxes and had conscribed people to do forced labor for him. And the people came to Solomon's son, David's grandson, and they said, "Ease up. Let's start a new leaf. If you ease up just a bit, we'll be happy to follow you." But in a moment of extreme arrogance and youthful pride, King David's grandson, now reigning on the throne, said, "My pinky is bigger than my father's thigh." Or translated in today's lingo, "You ain't seen nothing yet." And they rebelled. Civil war started, and these people, all related, all part of the same family, 10 of those tribes, revolted against the rule of David's grandson. They established a new kingdom. They set up a new temple on the mountain of Samaria, and the Jews despised them. You don't worship the true God. You don't worship in the right place. You are nothing but rebels. You don't care about the heritage of our people. You. Accusations came again and again and again, full of hatred and vitriol. And then when those people were conquered by the Assyrians, who had this great principle of keeping order in their vast empire by mixing populations up. So the Assyrians took all the great leaders out of those 10 northern tribes and scattered them across the face of Asia and mixed all sorts of other kinds of foreigners back into that area where those 10 northern tribes were, mixed them all together so that they couldn't rebel. Well, people needed husbands. People needed wives. The only people there were foreigners. They fell in love. They married. The Jews in Jerusalem said, "Now, we knew you were no good. See, now, not only are you rebels, but now you're nothing but bastards and half-breeds, not worthy of God's love. All you do is pervert and destroy everything that God has given us." And the Jews turned their backs on them. At least several centuries of that kind of hatred had been in place when Jesus walked straight into Samaria. It was right up to a well in the center of town. A well that was created by the common ancestor of all of them. And sits down and says to a Samaritan woman, the lowest of the low of the low, "How about something to drink?" She's shocked. What is this Jew talking to me, and why is he talking so nicely? He didn't come up to me and say, "You scum dog." He said, "If you knew who was asking you for a drink, you would ask him for living water. It would bubble up inside of you and overflow to eternal life." She says to him, "You Jews say that we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem. We worship in Samaria." Jesus says, "Abba, Papa. Papa looks for worshipers everywhere." and Papa is love. Abba spreads his love on all the creation, and there is not one human being who has lived or will live. There is not one human being, no matter what they have done, that is not worthy, that is not full of God's deepest desire to reach out and to love and to embrace and to restore and to make whole. I'm not here to argue about who's right and who's wrong in this fight. I'm just here to tell you that God loves you and that God is spirit and you can worship God anywhere. This past week we celebrated the feast of Patrick. I imagine most people celebrated the feast of Patrick with some alcoholic beverages. Many of them perhaps dyed green. I know I did on Friday night. But the thing we need to remember about Patrick is that he's a mirror of Jesus in this story. This Jesus who comes to the enemy and does nothing but declare God's love. Patrick doesn't need to be remembered for green beer and wild parties. Patrick needs to be remembered for the witness of his life. Patrick was taken. He was kidnapped, just like slaves in Africa were kidnapped and taken to the New World. Raiding marauders came to the British Isles and they stole him as a child to be a slave in Ireland. And he was a slave of the Irish people for quite some time until he managed to escape, go back home, become a priest, a bishop, and then he had a vision of the Irish saying, "Come, help us." Patrick went back to the very people who had enslaved him, the very people who had kidnapped him, the very people who had abused him, the very people who had taken away his freedom. And like Jesus at the Samaritan woman's at the well, he said, God loves you. God wants living water flowing in you. God has a gift for you that you cannot imagine. A gift that comes to every person in baptism, and a gift that those of us who are baptized we so often forget to call upon. This gift that allows us to be healed of hurts. This gift that allows us to forgive. This gift that allows us to be transformed. This gift that allows us to see and be like God is, not broken human beings which judge one another, but people who look at every human being and can say nothing other than, God loves you. God wants the best for you. God has plans for you that you can only dream of. One generation after Patrick died, Ireland was Christian. Ireland was filled with living water, bubbling over and flowing, which began a great missionary effort, the likes of which the world has never seen. What about you? What about me? Do we really believe that Papa loves us? Do we really trust that this Abba that Jesus talks about wants the best for us? Do we call upon the power of the Spirit to give us that living water promised to us in baptism, that it may overflow, so that we can be like Jesus, who says, look, the fields are ready for harvest, and we like Patrick, we like Jesus can go out to people who are so different from us, to people who are hurting, and give that same message. You are loved. You are cherished. There is nothing that you have done. There is no hurt that you have given. There is no hurt that you have received. There is no wound that you carry that cannot be healed cannot allow you to bubble over with God's power and transforming grace. Jesus said, if you knew who you were talking with, he would give you living water. We know who we are talking with. Are we asking for the living water that leads to not only our eternal life, but to the salvation